Do you have a few minutes?
I gotta make some changes in my life. Do you even realize what your life means?
Morning Cup of Joe, a Missouri S&T podcast using pop culture to destigmatize mental health.
Fake laugh, hiding real pain.
Do not self-destruct.
I didn't ask for this to happen.
Join us in using everyday examples to explain usable techniques to help improve your mental well-being.
Stay a while and listen.
Welcome back, minors. My name is Tracy Kriegel, and I'm a counselor here in Student Wellbeing.
And my name is Amber Johnston. I'm also a counselor here in Student Wellbeing, and it's time for your Morning Cup of Joe. So, Tracy, have you seen the live-action version of The Little Mermaid?
Nope, but I have seen the original version of The Little Mermaid, and I think I'm dating myself by telling you that.
Well, but it's a classic.
This is true. Does that make me classical?
We're not talking like Steamboat Willie here.
Okay, good.
I think pretty much everyone. I've got a friend and her daughter is 11 or 12, and she is a massive fan of
Okay, good.
Mermaid,
I'm not feeling so bad.
Yeah. So, The Little Mermaid is one of my absolute favorite Disney movies. I don't know about you. But I think that it sets up a really dangerous idea of what love is.
So explain to me how you think it sets up a dangerous side of love.
Because I think that it confuses love with limerence.
Okay, so you're about to take the romance out of it, aren't you?
Yeah, that's kind of what I do.
Wah, wah, wah.
I am going to explain what's happening in our brain when we go through the process of falling in love.
Okay, so sounds good. So let's talk about what limerence is. So limerence is an intense, often obsessive attraction that we feel towards a romantic interest. It's the emotion often associated with what we call being in love. Mm-hmm. And so limerence is immediate, and it's based primarily on physical and chemical attraction. It's often started before we even know if our attraction is even returned. Chemically speaking, the reason limerence occurs is to encourage pair bonding.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about chemically what's happening. So in the beginning of the movie, you see Ariel, who's feeling very lonely and isolated, which that just alone is going to make you more likely to experience limerence. Right. She becomes fascinated with the human world, and she decides to go spy on a human ship. And through the side of the ship, she sees Eric. And instantly she becomes drawn to him. Handsome stranger, he's dancing around, blah, 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 blah. And she becomes physically attracted to him on sight. Her brain immediately starts producing a chemical called phenylethylamine, or P. I am terrible at pronouncing that, so please, I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. And P increases the communication between nerve cells and encourages your brain to produce dopamine and norepinephrine. So her brain's now flooded with all this dopamine and phenylethylamine, and she becomes fascinated with Eric. She wants to see more of him.
Okay, so guys, hang on to dopamine. Remember dopamine. It's that reward chemical. So it provides that intense feeling of motivation, alertness, and pleasure. We all want more dopamine, right? Mm-hmm. And so norepinephrine, which is another neurotransmitter, causes her to feel giddy and euphoric. And that flood of these neurotransmitters encourages her to keep doing the activity associated with their release, which includes thinking about the person. So she's constantly thinking about Eric and talking to or about the person, and she's fantasizing about him and fantasizing about talking to him and spending time with him and actually going to see him. And so it causes us to think and talk about the object of our affection all the time. So she's just head over heels all the time, yak, 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 about Eric.
Yep.
And so-
This stage. If Ariel had a notebook, she would be writing her Ariel plus Eric all over the notebook with little hearts.
Yes.
Yep. Did you know, just as a side note here, did you know that brain scans of people who were in this stage, like that being in love, they did brain scans of them, and they showed intense firing in the primary reward center of the brain, or the WTA of the brain, when they were shown pictures of the person that they had these feelings towards,
Interesting.
which is where the dopamine is produced. So you can actually see the elements of this stuff happening in real time. It's really kind of cool.
So cool.
Brain is so neat.
It is. It's like amazing. So so Ariel then, when she sees Eric and her blood's flooded with this dopamine and norepinephrine, which is now associated with Eric. So dopamine, norepinephrine, here's Eric, here's dopamine and norepinephrine. She begins to have obsessive thoughts about him. So she feels dreamy and has that walk on air feeling.
Swimming on air.
Yeah, swimming on air. She wants to see him again. She can't bear to think of not being able to see him again. And that leads her to telling her father in the cartoon version, but Daddy, I love him.
It's not in the live action version from what I saw, or like when I watched it, but it's like I remember watching it in the animated version going, man, you've never even talked to this guy.
I see her just like swimming around the water and like, ooh-hoo, ooh-hoo,
But I love him. Right. Mhm. So I want to make the point here that she legitimately knows absolutely nothing about him. All of these intense emotions are built on her idea of him, which may or may not be rooted in reality. She's built an idea of who he is, a fantasy in her mind, which as she continues to think about him more and more grows, and it becomes bigger and bigger. And she tells her father that he's compassionate and he's kind, and that's actually in the live action version. But in reality, she has no idea, no reason for this concept of him outside of the few minutes she watched him on the ship. So she's literally looked across the ship, seen him, doing his thing, and decided that he's compassionate and kind. Everything she has built in her mind is what she wants him to be instead of actually who he is as a person.
Right. So we call this a crush.
Yes.
Got a crush on what that looks like.
And as the crush and obsession grows, her need to see him and be around him grows. Again, to encourage that pair bonding. This stage can be associated with stalking, both the kind that's considered socially harmless, like looking them up online and running them and checking out all their social media, and the even more dangerous types that if the person is predisposed to those. So remember that everything that they find out goes into building that narrative they have in their mind, which means even when they see the red flags that say, hey, this person's not going to be a great partner, they tend to gloss them over and find excuses and reasons for that. And, hey, it's not that big of a deal and all that other stuff. We don't want to mess with that idea of what I think this person is. So when it comes to reality versus the narrative idea of that person is always going to win out over what the reality of what that person actually is. And this is the point where Ariel literally sells her soul to be closer to Eric. And consider how frightening this actually is. She's willing to be enslaved by Ursula's sea witch for a man she literally knows nothing about.
I'm over here just like shaking my head. And this is the danger of limerence. We act irrationally, we act out of character, and if we aren't careful, we can harm our other relationships with friends and family, and people even risk their jobs being distracted and daydreaming. It's like we just go out in left field, when these crushes happen. 'Cause
Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, Romeo and Juliet. I mean, wow.
Limerence, like when you get into limerence in movies and theaters and even in reality, like limerence can be extremely dangerous because people do things that are out of character and they do.
Yeah, these are these stories where you meet somebody online that you've been talking to and then you just hop in a car and drive across the country and you never met them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely
how do
what
people
happens.
do that? Like, No. You see a picture of them, like, oh, I fall in love with that picture. And boom, you're gone. Like,
Yep.
Whoa, how does that happen?
Well, and sometimes we end up with a happy ending and we end up with
Yeah.
love out of the deal.
Yeah.
But then there's also like the other pieces of time where the person's not actually a suitable partner and you don't.
Yeah.
And you end up with like bad things
so
happen.
Limerence was what started that.
Limerence is what started it.
Yeah.
So at this point, Ariel gets to meet Eric for the first time, and she actually gets to start spending time with him, which is the whole reason biologically speaking, is the reason why this chemical reaction is doing. It's to encourage you to spend time because it wants you to develop that pair bond. They start getting to know each other, and you can see those connections start to build. And as they spend time together, some of the other neurotransmitters start getting released. So every time she hangs out with him, when there's physical contact, we see a release of that oxytocin, and which is the bonding neurotransmitter. Happens when we cuddle or we hold hands with people we care about. We also start to see as they start to feel emotionally connected, we'll start to seeing the neurotransmitter serotonin start to be released. So she's just basically a big old neurotransmitter soup. At this point.
You're right. So basically your brain becomes a flurry of neurotransmitters and chemical rewards. So it's just, I love how you put that, neurotransmitter soup. So poof. So, your brain's trying to encourage you to pair bond, and all these neurotransmitter soups is there to ensure that you spend enough time with the other person in order to build that lasting love with that person. So end goal is love. And so once it's determined that the romantic feelings are returned and a deeper bond starts to be created with transition from what we call the honeymoon phase of the relationship, that which can last for 6 to 18 months, the replacement begins happening as we find out more and more about our partners, and reality begins to replace the fantasy version of our mind in our mind. The intensity of Limerence phase begins to fade, and we start to develop a genuine affection for our partner and who they really are as a person. We don't really get to see this in The Little Mermaid, as everything takes place in less than a week.
Yeah. I mean, we're just a couple days.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it never gets to that point. And then she marries him.
Yeah, I'm thinking that probably.
You see,
would.
like
Yeah.
she totally gave up her legs and married him.
Yeah.
Or gave up her fins.
Yeah.
And
Fins.
got legs
Yeah.
and married him
Yeah.
based on limerence.
Yeah.
So, yeah, at this point, let's go some of the differences between limerence and love. Limerence is very anxiety producing. Limerence is a state of almost constant anxiety. It constantly looks for hidden meanings. And it's going over whether there's a period after the word in his text to determine if he's mad at you.
Yeah.
Like limerence is constantly, it's insecure, it's jealous, its purpose is to own and possess, it's fear of loss, it's frightening and exciting all at the same time. Limerence is a roller coaster. It's exhilarating and exhausting. You never want it to end, and you can't wait to feel it again, and you don't really notice the dirt or the smell or the noise or the negative parts of it when you're experiencing it. Everything is just glossed over by all that excitement, and when it ends, it's devastating, and you feel like you can't survive without your partner. Limerence is codependent.
Yeah, and so let's look at the opposite. So let's look at what we want to have, which is love. And so love, on the other hand, is selfless and kind. It feels safe and secure. And at the end of the day, it's you and your partner against the world. Don't we all want that? Yeah. Love really becomes the absence of anxiety. And the presence of someone you love can regulate your heart rate and breathing and can make you feel calmer. It's quiet and calm. It's a beautiful, majestic sunset sitting on a front porch with your favorite beverage. Love is more mindful. You notice the beauty in everything. You see the flaws. You might notice the grass needs to be mowed or that your siding needs replaced, but it doesn't distract from the sunset. Instead of ignoring the issues, you want to fix them. In love, you can live without your partner if you had to, but you'd prefer not to. Love is interdependence.
And that's the big point there is that you see that there are issues. You're not just sweeping them under the rug, and you're willing to work on them and make them better because you want your relationship to be the best possible instead of just ignoring it and sweeping it under the rug.
Yeah. And I think the thing that's also worth saying is love is not perfect.
No, it's absolutely not. And we shouldn't seek for it. Your partner isn't perfect, and it's not important. It's important to realize that they're a human being just like you are.
Right.
And Limerence has them in this illusion of perfection.
Right.
And so when that comes crashing down, just kind of like when you were a teenager and you realize your parents aren't perfect, like it goes completely the other way.
Right, exactly.
So how do we steer ourselves away from limerence and towards love? Now, naturally, limerence is there to create a progression from limerence to love. However, we don't want to end up in limerence with somebody that is the wrong person, and then we end up wasting time and heartache on a partner that is not somebody that is a long-term partner. First, we have to keep ourselves grounded. Know what your deal breakers are in a relationship and keep them. There are things we can work on in a relationship, and there are things we can't. We cannot change who our partner is as a person. We can't change their core values. We can work on improving communication, but we have to know what our limits are that prevent us from getting caught up in limerence with a partner is not somebody we want to be with long term. A great example would be if like one of you wanted kids and then the other one didn't.
Yeah, that's kind of like a deal breaker.
That's a deal
That's
breaker.
a deal breaker, yeah. So, I think we can also ensure we maintain our other relationships. I have seen so many people get into relationships where you can only be my partner and you can't have friends. That's a deal breaker. So, spending time with our family and friends is so vital to a healthy relationship. So so often we find couples in limerence that isolate themselves away from everybody else. That's completely unhealthy. You can't just be two people conquering the world.
Yeah, limerence ends. Like that's limerence.
Limerence ends.
Always ends.
Yeah. So ignoring your friends and family is unhealthy. When limerence ends, as it has to, we find ourselves trying to rebuild those relationships. And sometimes, depending on how secure it was before, we might not be able to. Your friends might say, you know what, you ditched me for that dude over there or that girl over there or your partner. No, you're not getting my relationship back. If I wasn't good enough for you when you were with them, then I'm not good enough for you now. So it is important and it's healthy to maintain relationships when you find a new partner. And so that is so important, that being able to maintain relationships is a part of love.
Right. And your partner should want you to.
Yes, your partner should want you to. Absolutely, I agree with you. 100%.
That's a big key here. Is your partner should want. And here's the thing that I've told people before. Like when you're in that limerence stage, you can't bear to be out, away from your partner for the evening. When you're in the love stage, you get excited when your partner's got a poker game or, whatever going on, because now you get the bed to yourself and you can sit there and eat the Oreos under the covers and you're like, ha, 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 I have the big bed. Because at the end of the night, your partner's going to be coming home.
Yeah.
And so it's important to differentiate that. You don't have to be with your partner every second because you feel that security that they're going to come back. Yeah. They're going to be with you, and at the end of the day, they're there.
Girls' time is healthy. Guys' time is healthy. It's important to spend time with your friends. It's important time to spend with your family. You know, if your partner doesn't want you to go spend time with your family, that's unhealthy too.
Yes.
You should be able to go over to your mom and dad's and hang out for the evening. And then if they don't want to go, cool. But you should also be able to spend time, friends, family. That should be healthy. You should be able to take your partner with to your family too. Of course, sometimes that can be difficult if family and partners don't get along. So that can kind of be a little bit contentious. But those are things that we have to evaluate across the board. So, keep that in perspective. But we should be able to hang out with friends, family within that love. basis, in that love relationship.
And they should want you to do your hobbies and your interests. You should be able to spend time not only away from, like, with this person, but also away from them. And that's the key there, is because when you're in limerence, you don't want to be away from that person for a second.
Yeah.
And when you're away from that person, you're constantly texting them.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean that when you love somebody, you don't want to talk to them all the time. Like,
Right.
obviously you do. But it means that you don't have to.
Right. There's more of a balance when you're loving someone. It's okay to not want to text them all the time. So I think that's an important key, because you're safe and you're secure knowing that
They're there.
they're there. And that's that important piece, that at the end of the day, they're going to come home. Or if they're gone on a trip, they're going to call you when they get there. They're going to be on their business trip. Or if they're an athlete and they're gone for 2 or 3 days to Indiana, to Notre Dame, and they're going to come back after their, track meet's over, their football game or their basketball game's over, and they come home, they're going to still be that same person,
Yeah.
And
They're not going to randomly meet somebody on that trip.
No, they're not. And I think,
And you know that they're not.
yeah, exactly. So I think that's that piece. There's trust. It's built into the relationship of love. And I said, that's that piece that we have that's in that love. And limerence doesn't always give you that.
No, limerence is
Well, it doesn't give
constantly
you that, so
being
yeah.
afraid that if they see somebody or they talk to somebody, now that person, they're going to, ditch me for them, and they're going to, do this and they're going to do that. And it's constantly being afraid that the relationship is going to end. You're never on even keel. You're constantly, but at the same time, the highs are high and the lows are low.
Right.
So it's that roller coaster, up and down and up and down, and constantly being afraid you're going to lose that person. So you're afraid to go out with your friends, because you're afraid if you go out with your friends, they're going to meet somebody else, so they're going to get bored, or they're going to do this, so they're going to do that. That's one of the key indicators of limerence versus love. And the big thing is, remember, limerence ends and love is what you have left over.
Right, exactly.
At the end.
Right.
Now, that's being said, we fall in and out of love. You go through periods of limerence light. I wouldn't say it's to the level it is the first time, but you go through limerence light with your partner at various points. But the difference is over various points in your relationship. The difference is that at that point you know that person, and it's you have all the chemical releases, but you actually deeply know who that person is as a person.
So to sum it up, limerence is about possession and fusion with the other person. It's codependent. But love is interdependent and about selflessness and wanting the best for your partner. And that kind of puts it in that basis. If you're in limerence, it's codependent. If it's about love, it's about selflessness and interdependence.
Yeah.
Or independence, yeah.
Well, and limerence ends, and love is lasting.
It's lasting, yeah. It's a great way to say it. So
Love is lasting.
love is lasting.
And we have to, limerence, yes, can lead to love, but remember that biologically speaking, that's what its purpose is to
Right.
lead to love. But we have to keep the logic in there and realize, if I'm feeling this limerence, that this is the time for me to evaluate if this is a partner that I want to fall in love with.
Sure. Yeah. Ariel gave it all up.
Yeah,
So
she did.
She did.
She didn't even know.
Yeah.
And sometimes people gamble and it pays off for them, and then other times people gamble and they end up in some bad situations.
Yeah. So logic, use our heads, really think things through. Don't leap.
Don't leap.
I think that's that space that we learn to really, think things through, use good logical thinking skills.
I know couples that got married 2 weeks after they
Me
met,
too.
and they've been together forever.
Yeah.
And but you think about how that's like winning the lottery right
It
there.
is. I have a couple friend, we call them mom and pop, and they dated for 2 weeks, and they just celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary. Like, they've been together for ever, and they compliment each other so well.
Yeah, the rarity of
The
that happening.
rarity, yeah.
Yeah.
So rare.
How many couples, comparatively, how many couples do you know that did that and then they didn't last 5 years?
Very, very few. So
Yeah.
very, very few.
And that's what it is. It's really a gamble at that point.
It is. So I think it's that space, especially in the day and age we live in today. So we're a different generation of people. So
Yeah.
yeah. So wisdom.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us this week, miners, and we will see you next week.
Take care. If you like this podcast, please remember to like and subscribe. To schedule an appointment or to reach out to us about future topics you would like to see, please email us at wellbeing@mst.edu. You can also reach us by phone at 573-341-4211. We are located at 204 Norwood Hall.
I accept the challenge.
Get out there and do your best!
Hey, go easy on yourself. Come on now.
Now you're talking!
For more mental health and well-being content, please follow us on Facebook at Missouri S&T Wellbeing and on Instagram at S&T Wellbeing.
But most importantly,
Never give up.